Good afternoon from Vienna. My name is Tatiana Mašik. I am a PhD student at the University of Veterinary Medicine within the unit of Veterinary Public Health and Epidemiology. I recently completed a project regarding the epidemiological and economic impact of a potential FMD outbreak in Austria. The objective of the study was to evaluate the effectiveness of different control measures in two Austrian regions with different livestock structure and density, to estimate the overall economic impact, and to assess the personal resources that would be required to control the FMD outbreak. In today's presentation, I would like to bring to your attention the following topics. After a short introduction, I will give you an explanation of the specifics and parameters of our simulation, as well as the regions for which the simulation was conducted. Finally, I am going to present the epidemiological and economic results, including the evaluation of different control measures, as well as the sensitivity analysis of personal resources. Austria has been free of FMD since 1981, when a very small outbreak occurred in a single district in Lower Austria, but this one was eliminated very fast. In the year 1973, Austria experienced a very large outbreak with more than 1,600 infected herds and more than 80,000 culled animals. So as one can see, we don't really have a recent experience with FMD in Austria, and that is why epidemiological models such as EuFMDiS are of such an importance to us. In Austria, we have about 5.2 million susceptible livestock animals, out of which more than a half are swine. We have about 105,000 livestock herds, and compared to other EU countries, these herds are much smaller. For example, one average cattle herd consists of only 24 animals. The livestock density is very heterogeneous in Austria. The majority of high-dense areas are situated in southern Styria, Lower and Upper Austria, where the most of the large herds are located. As I already mentioned, our objective was to compare the dynamics and size of the outbreak in two different regions, and both these regions differ with regard to livestock density, livestock production system, herd size, and herd type. Region North is a livestock dense area and is characterized by intensive livestock production and high number of large cattle and swine herds, as well as a high rate of animal movements. Region West is characterized by sparsely dense livestock areas, small herds, and numerous mountain pastures. The outbreak simulation was initiated in both regions in randomly chosen dairy cattle herds, and in each iteration a different herd was chosen. The outbreak was simulated to be undetected until day 21. In addition to the reference scenario, 4 alternative control scenarios based on the variation of preventive depopulation and vaccination strategies were applied, and the optimal control strategy was considered to be the strategy with the lowest total cost of the outbreak. Now I would like to switch to the economic part. Total costs were classified into direct and indirect costs. Direct costs included cost of control activities, including compensation payments, and were assessed by the EuFMDiS model. Indirect costs were estimated by our own economic model and included export losses, production losses in zones, and production losses in culled herds. Different time periods were assumed for the duration of export bans for EU and non-EU countries, and it was assumed that EU export bans only affect the infected regions. Non-EU bans would be imposed for all Austrian herds. Production losses in zones were estimated for dairy cattle farms, and production losses in culled herds were assessed for all farms categories based on the contribution margin model. Here you can see an overview of the epidemiological results of the simulation for both regions. The differences between region North and West are obvious at first sight. The results for region North showed a rather large outbreak with more than 80 infected farms and almost 5,000 culled animals in the reference scenario. The median value of the epidemic control duration is 76 days. All implemented alternative control strategies resulted in fewer infected farms than the reference scenario, whereas the preemptive depopulation control strategy reached the highest degrees of 51%. But as one can see, in this scenario, it would be necessary to cull more than 15,000 animals, most of them probably not infected. Another striking observation appears in this scenario, namely the prolonged epidemic control duration. This period is very long and in this case an indication that the resource planning in the area of cleaning and disinfection was not chosen optimally. And this is something that we want to deal with in the future. Epidemiological results showed that the magnitude of the outbreak in the West region would be most likely relatively small and of short duration. Thus, the control measures in the reference scenario would be sufficient for bringing the outbreak under control in this region. The reference scenario resulted in 15 infected farms, 843 culled animals, and an epidemic control duration of almost 40 days. Other control strategies, besides ring culling, showed very similar results as the reference scenario regarding the number of infected farms and epidemic control duration. The economic results showed that the total amount of cost is in relation to the epidemiological results. Within the region North, the lowest total cost arose within the population control strategy, followed by a suppressive vaccination scenario. The total cost for the reference scenario amounted to 543 million euro, out of which 4% were direct costs. The largest share, 74% of direct costs, was allocated to surveillance, followed by compensation and disposal. The majority of indirect costs was attributed to export losses, 91%, and production losses accounted for a share of approximately 9%. Within the region West, reference scenario and suppressive vaccination showed most preferable and very similar results regarding total cost. We conducted a sensitivity analysis to assess the impact of resources on epidemic magnitude. The results demonstrated that varying the capacity of resources for surveillance had a substantial effect on the outbreak size and the epidemic control duration. An increase of the teams by 25% resulted in 11% decrease in the number of infected herds and a significant shorter epidemic control duration. Additionally, sensitivity analysis for cleaning and disinfection resources was conducted for preemptive depopulation scenario, and it could be demonstrated that increase in the number of teams influenced the epidemic control duration, but didn't reduce the outbreak size. In summary, one may conclude that an FMD outbreak in Austria would cause considerable losses for the national economy, and therefore it is of utmost importance to prevent an incursion of FMD into Austria. It appears that there is a significant impact of the density of the affected region, chosen control measures, and the availability of sufficient resources on the spread of the disease. If FMD is introduced in Austria, it is essential that the virus be eliminated quickly in order to regain access to export markets as fast as possible. Once the epidemic started in an area with high livestock density, preemptive depopulation of livestock within 1 kilometer radius around the infected herds would be the most cost-effective mitigation strategy. Currently, estimated resources for surveillance and cleaning and disinfection during an FMD outbreak in Austria would be insufficient, which would lead to an extended epidemic control duration. Increasing personal resources limits the epidemic magnitude to a degree comparable to additional control strategies such as vaccination, while maintaining the same level of resources. This brings me to the end of my presentation. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I am happy to take your questions now.